Greetings and welcome to today's edition of The Tipping Point. Of course, I'm your host, Richard Ashu Atem-Ojong. If you are a Cameroonian, then I'm sure you like football, or at least Cameroonian football. By that, I'm sure you are indifferent with CAF's decision to strip from us hosting rights for the Africa Cup of Nations for 2019. That hurt a lot of people, though not quite some. Why? Because one of CAF's reasons for stripping those rights is the insecurity issues in Cameroon. And the Anglophone crisis, spanning over 2 years now, has left many Cameroonians again not indifferent, with several opinions, some for and some against. These two issues, the hosting of the Africa Cup of Nations for 2019 and the Anglophone crisis, have huge implications for the finance bill for 2019. That budget was drafted with specifications on the Anglophone crisis as well as CAF's as well as the hosting of the 2019 Africa Cup of Nations. We're losing that right and the crisis is persisting. My guest for today is a household name in Cameroon, social activist and politician, but she's here today on her economic and entrepreneurial prowess. She's CEO of Strategies Cameroon, Madame Kah Walla Edith. Good to have you on the show today, ma'am.
Pleasure to be here.
And I must say it's a nice place you have here. Thank you for letting us use your beautiful green garden. It looks great.
Thank you.
Thank you. So let's get straight to business. Are you a football fan? Let me start with that.
I am absolutely a football fan. In my younger days, I used to be a football player. And I have a professional football coach in my family and a professional football player. So I am definitely keeping track of football.
So your political stance aside and your understanding of the economic issues aside, how did you feel when Ahmad of CAF announced that Cameroon will not be hosting the 2019 Cup of Nations again?
You know, honestly, I think that I had, you know, at a personal level, very, very strong doubts about our ability to host the tournament, given the fact that we are simply not ready. It is clear. You don't have to be an infrastructure specialist. You don't have to be a building specialist. It's very clear that we are not ready. The main infrastructure of the stadiums is not ready. The secondary infrastructure, which is supposed to support those stadiums, that is roads leading to them, hotels, restaurants, you know, all of the infrastructure that goes to such a tournament is clearly not ready. And I also think that Cameroon was given an out, you know, when the tournament was switched from 16 teams to 24 teams. We were given the option to postpone, to maintain ourselves as a host and to postpone. And I think there, on strictly managerial terms, we were not proactive. We did not take the right management decision, because you cannot be at a time where you're organizing elections, you have a war in the northwest and the southwest, you have problems in your treasury, in your national treasury, to be able to finance such a venture. And there we saw not a management decision, but a political decision. So the decision was political, feeling that the hosting of the African Cup of Nations was somehow going to influence the president's win at the election. And it was a bad management decision. I think we can say that.
Okay, so we knew that we were going to host this tournament in 2014.
Yes.
So 5 years down the line, we are still not ready.
Yes.
Now, is it that the management was simply inefficient, or we did not have the resources to even properly manage in the first place?
The management was inefficient. And I think anybody who wants to behave as if this is a surprise to them is being very dishonest. Cameroon is never ready for its deadlines. We are never ready for our deadlines. We are always managing things at the very last moment. It is a culture in this particular regime. We have seen holidays, national holidays here, announced the morning of the day when it's supposed to be a holiday, whereas people knew that eventuality was there. So no, I think that there's nothing surprising, really, even though Cameroonians are shocked and they are disappointed. But I think if we are honest with ourselves, we know that this is totally in line with the management culture of this regime. They don't get ready for things on time. They don't meet deadlines, and they don't take into account significant elements like this idea of the crisis in the Northwest and Southwest, which, I mean, 2014, this crisis was full-blown. In 2016, definitely in 2017, we knew that we had a very, very serious problem, and Cameroon, the regime refused to step ahead in front of the problem. They remained behind it, and finally CAF had to take the decision for them.
The day after CAF made the announcement, Cameroon's Minister of Communication went on air and said that decision was unfair to Cameroon, and he promised that to prove his point, or the government's stance, they were going to complete all the projects in record time. That's before June of 2019. Do you think we're going to meet up to that deadline now?
No. Very clear, no. We didn't meet the deadline when we had, because the CAF is not, when you say it's unfair, it would be unfair if you were where you were supposed to be in terms of the contractual arrangement, because it's a contractual arrangement with CAF. When they award us as a host, they give us a book of play. They give us a book of play with what is supposed to be done, by when, and so on and so forth. And we are not on time. So I don't see how, when we had, you know, the impulse of hosting the tournament, we didn't meet the deadline, and it is now that that impulse has been removed that all of a sudden we are going to meet that deadline.
Let's talk a little about the logistics surrounding the tournament. Hotels, for example, road infrastructure, service, telecommunications, and all of these issues. Now, true, we're expecting several hundreds, if not millions of people to have flocked into Cameroon to participate in the tournament and to just watch it. We have lived in this country like that. So what's to say these people could not come, stay in the same environment, same setting, and then, okay, this is Cameroon for you, take us the way we are, and then give us our hosting rights?
I think that, one, we have to realize that when we are not hosting the Cameroon Cup of Nations, we are hosting the African Cup of Nations. So it is the continent whose image is on the line. It's not Cameroon's image which is on the line. It is the entire 54 countries on our continent. And let us not forget that for that tournament, you don't just have African journalists, you don't just have African spectators, you have the media from around the world, you have spectators from around the world. So it was not, if CAF took it away from us, it's because it was not just Cameroon's reputation on the line, it was the entire continent's reputation on the line. I would like to tell you, my business, my entrepreneurial function, I am a leadership and management consultant, and my main area of work, my main market is Africa. And I've visited about 33 out of the 54 countries in Africa. And I can tell you, Cameroon is one of the worst today. We have countries which are much poorer than we are, but who have managed to put in basic infrastructure in terms of roads, in terms of hotels. You have countries where you go to a 2-star hotel and it is a clean, decent place where you can sleep. In Cameroon, in a 5-star hotel, you may see a cockroach, you may see a mouse. So, yes, or brown towels. So we are not up to standard in terms of everything that has to do with tourism. We are definitely not up to standard. And for us to get to that standard, you see, when you take the hosting of this kind of a tournament, for a country, it is a wonderful opportunity because you can take your infrastructure from level 1 to level 5 in a very short space of time if you set those goals for yourself. If you see the hosting of the tournament not as a prestige element for your president, but rather as a development opportunity for the country. This was a huge economic development opportunity for our tourism industry. But we did not see, we are only talking about the infrastructure. Where were the seminars to train all of the hoteliers and the restaurateurs to put them up to international standard? I had the privilege of going to Ghana when Ghana was celebrating its 50th anniversary of independence. They were training everybody who was involved in the value chain for over a year before. They were training the population. There were seminars on the television for Ghanaians to know how to receive visitors, how to make sure that visitors were not harassed, no stealing was going on, in order to give themselves a very favorable image in the eyes of the world. So, there is so much that was not done and that was not ready that, Cameroon was definitely going to miss this as an economic opportunity. Even if they gave it to us, it would have been like the Women's Cup of Nations, where we see there, yes, we were able to, at the last minute, have the infrastructure semi-ready because the infrastructure was not finished, but we were able to play the tournament. We had a team, and that's the sad part, is that you always have the individual Cameroonians who do their part. We had a women's team which was fantastic, which did a really good showing at that tournament, and which went on from there up till today. We are very, very happy with the women's team. But we did not feel the economic impact of the female African Cup of Nations. We did not see any change in Cameroon infrastructure-wise in terms of hotels and roads and so on. We don't have a legacy. There's nothing left from that tournament. Whereas when a country hosts one of these big events, that is the point. That is what the country is supposed to get out of it.
So, let's assume that we can convince Côte d'Ivoire to not bid in 2021, or however it works, we're hosting in 2021. And you have categorically said we're never ready with our deadlines. And if the system that is in place continues to prevail, there's a high probability that even in 2021, we still will not be ready to host the competition. So what do we need to do to be able to fix the problem?
So here I will take off my managerial hat and put on my political hat, unfortunately, because, the economy exists in politics. There's no economy without a political framework. And today it is the political framework which is an impediment to Cameroon's economic development. So the choice which is before us is a choice for us as Cameroonians. Are we going to continue? Are we going to continue to be embarrassed? Are we going to continue to be poor managers of our own resources? Because as long as we let a group of people, as long as we allow a regime to stay in place and to continue mismanaging our resources, then we are part of the problem as well. And I think the solution is for Cameroonians to take their responsibility, to bring about the change, what we call political transition, at the level of the Cameroon People's Party, at the level of Stand Up for Cameroon, to which I belong, and make sure that we have a different political team in place well before 2021. Because if it is this same team acting in this same manner, which they have done for 36 years, then you cannot expect a different result. You will still have a haphazard, last-minute, poorly managed result from which we, who are investing, because it is an investment by you and I, it is our money that is being put into this tournament. The debt, because we have contracted a lot of debt to be able to build these stadiums, that debt is being contracted in our name. So we have a decision to make. Either we let these very poor managers continue, or we get rid of them, and we'll be able to do quite a lot for the economy of Cameroon, not only organize the CAN.
I can't resist the temptation to follow you in that line of questioning, because in 2021, this same government, if we're going by the results of the just ended elections, will still be in power. If there's a cabinet checkup, it would just be maybe putting old wine into new wine skin. It's probably the same thing. So the question is, how are we going to be able to do that when we don't have the political instruments to effect change before 2021?
It is always important to remember, power belongs to the people. Always. And it is inscribed even in the current Cameroonian constitution. And so the people, if they want to exercise their power and change their government, they can do so tomorrow. They are not under the obligation to wait for anybody, to wait for any calendar, and certainly not to wait for a dictatorship that is organizing its elections just to amuse itself.
But isn't that in itself unconstitutional?
At all. At all. This country belongs to Cameroonians. Cameroonians, first of all, if we look at the current regime which is in place, from the head of state downwards, it is completely illegitimate and illegal. Because number one, how many Cameroonians voted during this election? Not up to 4 million Cameroonians voted. And this is a minority, a very small minority of the potential voter population. Why are others not voting? They no longer believe in the elections, because this government has managed to do what we call state capture. They have completely captured the state for themselves. They have completely captured all of the systems that are supposed to function for us as citizens to be at their service, including elections. As you know, the elections were a fiasco. They were full of fraud. They were full of manipulation. The electoral system in and of itself, as it exists, is a system which can only produce the type of result that it did. And most importantly for this particular election in 2018, it is illegitimate because part of the country was under war and did not have the ability to exercise its citizenship. And the election should never have taken place because of that. So for all of those reasons, democratically speaking, we can, as Cameroonians, and that is the stand of the Cameroon People's Party and Stand Up for Cameroon, that we should, without violence, non-violently, we should do what every other country that has a dictator has done.
So let's come back to CAF. In 2010, when South Africa hosted the World Cup, it plunged the country into huge debt. A lot of people didn't like Jacob Zuma's management of the tournament as a whole, but at least they hosted. This following year, when Brazil did similar thing, what would we have gained if we hosted the Nations Cup? You yourself said when we did the AFCON, that's the Africa Women's Cup of Nations, we didn't see it's almost like it was an everyday event for Cameroon. That there wasn't any significant economic change, not in the budget reflection, not in our GDP. Everything was literally the same. So if we did host, or even if we do host in 2021, what are we expecting to get from this tournament? Because it seems like we've lost quite a lot. But then what exactly have we lost? Would we have incurred more debt and not be able to see that translate into jobs for our young people? Or what, tangibly, what have we lost in not hosting the Nations Cup?
So, as you've rightly mentioned, these large-scale competitions, whether it is the World Cup, the Olympics, the African Nations Cup, and so on, tend to be, contrary to what people think, if you look just at the numbers, very often it's not profitable for the country that has hosted. And this is true for countries which are much better organized and much more well managed than Cameroon. However, there are a lot of other tangible and intangible benefits that come from hosting an African Nations Cup or any other large competition. But the country must organize itself. As I mentioned before, Cameroon's tourism industry, in spite of our amazing tourism potential, we have our tourism slogan is accurate, Africa in miniature. But we have African countries who don't have our diversity, who are much further in terms of tourism than we are. So this was an opportunity with the AFCON to take Cameroon from tourism level A, to tourism level, F or G. Yes, you leapfrog. That's what this allows you to do. And how would it allow you to do that? As I said, you would need to identify all of the actors in the chain. You would need to determine quality standards. Then you would need to support them to attain those quality standards in that very short space of time, which means giving them the opportunity for training, giving them the opportunity for investment, accompanying them as they put into place all of that, knowing that with the tournament you get an influx of cash, which does not necessarily set off your investment completely, but allows you to have that boost that can justify such an investment. So tourism was definitely one aspect of it. The second aspect was infrastructure. If you have a country that's well organized and you build the roads to the stadium, it's laughable because the primary stadium, the Amadou Ahidjo Stadium in Yaoundé, has no access roads. So if you had, taken that opportunity to build your access roads, of course, you remain with the road after the tournament has gone. If we had taken the opportunity to build the road here in Douala to the stadium in Japoma, then the population of Japoma, that whole area, is able to benefit from the fact that you had an AFCON years and years after it has come and gone. This is also true for like the hotel investments. It would have also have been a wonderful opportunity for our young technology community, because government could have set out a whole series of services that could be delivered using technological applications, and asking young Cameroonian technological entrepreneurs who are really very, very good to develop applications, to develop services for this tournament. Then the tournament would come and go, but the application has been developed. It remains in the society. And the final point I would say is image. You are selling the image of your country as a tourism destination, as an investment destination for countries countries even as an educational destination. So you see some countries would invest even in things like education and so on, which have nothing to do with football per se. And for Cameroon, the question we could ask ourselves was, where is the government's grand football vision? We are a football nation. We have the raw talent, more than we know what to do with. But our leagues do not function. We have no youth football to speak of. We do not have a pipeline. That is, you know, countries who are serious about football, they're identifying talent at 8, 9 years old and are putting them into a pipeline. So if we were serious about this AFCON for 5 years, we had the ability to build a grand football vision for Cameroon, to really let the natural talent which we have been given, we didn't do anything for it, we have been given that talent, to actually build that into an area of economic development and of personal growth and development for our young people. So you see everything that we must change the political framework. We must change the team that is in place, because we have so much in terms of resources and we are not attaining the objectives.
One last question on this sector before we go. Only a month ago, before we let these opportunities slip through our fingers, government issued bonds to try and help raise funds for this. We raised over 206 billion francs CFA, and that was meant to finance projects for the AFCON. These bonds are supposed to mature in 5 years. Where do you think this money will now be put to be able to pay the interest on these bonds, which was one of the highest since government started issuing bonds at 5.6%, to be able to pay the benefit for that in the next 5 years? And by implication, the small business owner who thought, okay, AFCON is coming, let me do this, and we've incurred all of these losses. How does government and these individuals who had invested for AFCON 2019, how do they get themselves back up from this punch?
So I think this question, much more to me than the 2021 tournament, this question is the key question we should be asking of this government now. One, it would be the best case, best practice, to have an independent commission put into place, not only government, but as you've said, private sector owners, financiers, people from the Football League, who would now sit down and do the financial assessment of where we are. Because it's the financial situation is extremely unclear. You have mentioned the 206 billion that was raised in terms of bonds. We know that government has injected some of its own money already. We know that there are other loans that have been taken. We know that there's aid that has been given. And then, as you said, we have local entrepreneurs who contracted loans in anticipation of an investment for this period. So we need to do all of that assessment and have a clear financial picture. Then we need to take strategic decisions. It's only when we know what the situation is that we can take the strategic decisions, that we can say which stadiums are worth completing now. And stadiums have to be worth completing now because they will continue to be profitable. In other words, we have to look at the stadium and say, after the tournament has gone, will we continue to be able to play local matches? Our businesses will fail.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for tuning in to this edition of The Tipping Point. Catch us again same time next week. We'll be right here. You don't want to miss out. Thank you very much. You've been talking to CEO for Strategies. You've heard from her ideas. I watch your TED Talks, reinventing the future. I use it to bounce back. So thank you very much. Always a pleasure having you aboard the program. God bless you. Bye-bye for now.